so it's still cold out. Not much going on in the way of yard sales lately, but recently I purchased a lot of game discs off of eBay. Condition varies on these, and it is disc-only diarrhea, but disc-only lots were my bread and butter for a long time. By trading in disc-only copies of games at GameStop, a place that is known to overpay for disc-only copies of games, I was really able to maximize the value of a lot of the games I had scavenged over time. At a glance, none of these look very valuable, but we only have $12 and some change in this lot, and there's some decent games here. It's time to do what I do and add some value and quality back into these poor unwanted games. I keep a big bin full of manuals, boxes, and cover art at my workstation. Years of buying box after box of game-related stuff has yielded me lots of spare parts, manuals, and boxes that didn't have their games in them. The first step after receiving a disc-only lot is to try and match all game discs with boxes and manuals from this bin. Any of these that I can make complete again will of course help put me in the green quicker. And who knows, some of these may actually make it onto my shelves. But I have always had a rule that I've got to be in the green before I start keeping things out of my game lots. So let's get there. So on the top of the stack, we've got Godfather Limited Edition. And you know, this game would have come in the big box with the bonus disc. That's obviously not what we have here. It's a disc-only copy. I do not have a box for this game. But this is a cool game. If you've ever looked at it, you know, I've had a few copies of this come through, you know, over time. I've just never spent a lot of time on it. But it's Grand Theft Auto-esque in its build. You know, the character models are pretty cool. And you know, the animation is cool, but what really sets it apart is the hand-to-hand combat. It's got some pretty brutal hand-to-hand. It's got some grappling that goes on there, some elbowing, you know, it gets pretty vicious. It's enough to intrigue me, to make me want to see more of this game. Is there still a market out there for this game? It's hard to say. PS2 stuff, it's just at an all-time low. But this is a neat game. Next in the stack is a copy of Gran Turismo 4, and I gotta tell you, what a great installment in the franchise Gran Turismo 4 was. Just a fantastic game, a fantastic showing. I had so much fun with all the Gran Turismos, but obviously Gran Turismo 4 was the best on this console, and honestly, to scale, possibly the best Gran Turismo of all time. I was so sure that I had a box and a manual for this thing, but I just don't. So this is going to remain a disc-only copy, but still, as cool as this game is, I should have no problem finding it a good home. Next in the stack, I'm finding Jak and Daxter, the Precursor Legacy. And you know, I didn't play a whole lot of the Jak and Daxter stuff back in the day. Most of the games in that genre to me were just trying to capitalize on what Mario 64 had done so flawlessly, and other games just weren't getting it done because they weren't Mario. Now that was just my opinion. Obviously those games did very well. Jak and Daxter, Ratchet and Clank, the list goes on, but I just never spent a lot of time with those games. They just seemed like all of them were just running around and picking up things, and that was all there was to it. I do owe all those games a second look. And I know there are huge fan bases for these games, so should be able to find this thing a home fairly quickly, but it's got some scratches. I want to make this disc look better. Buffing discs is normally a one-step process for me. Just getting some compound on the wheel and letting it rip for about a minute or so. 9 times out of 10 that fixes all your issues. The discs come out looking good, And most of the scratches are gone unless they're really, really deep. And even if they're really, really deep, they're usually not causing an issue anymore after you've given the disc a good polishing. Every once in a while you gotta kick it up a notch and go to the two-step plan. You're gonna have to do some sanding, and that's a last resort. Once a disc is so bad that you need to sand it, odds are it's not going to play right, at least not all the way through. I will say that PlayStation 2 discs seem to have the best survival rate as far as going through these processes, but right now I just have high hopes that every one of these discs is going to come out working great. Now I'm pulling up a copy of Hitman Contracts. No, not for me. I'm sorry. I have beef with the Hitman franchise, alright? Everybody will tell you these are great games, and they keep making these games, and I can't tell you why. You can't give these things away. They don't sell. I've had so many copies of Hitman games come through here over the time that I've been in this business, and you can't give these things away. They're worth next to nothing. I remember when Hitman Absolution came out, and that thing was in the bargain bin before you could blink, and yet everybody was still like, oh, it's a good game, man. Oh, it's a great game, man. Yeah, great game. Why did it get to the bargain bin so fast? These things are like boogers on your finger. They're worth nothing, and you cannot get rid of them. You can't get them to go away. So here's another one. And worse yet, somebody took permanent marker and colored on it. They wanted to get rid of the rating, it looks like. Were they trying to hide it from their parents? I don't know, but it's got black permanent marker on it. That counts as topside damage. That is not going to help this thing as far as value. And boy, it needed some help in that department. We'll be lucky if we get anything for this game at all. So here's a copy of Final Fantasy X. Another game I've had tons of copies of, and another game that really doesn't sell very well. It's just really common, but it is Final Fantasy. Now, as the Final Fantasies went on, they kind of started developing so quickly that I just couldn't keep up. I lost track, I got behind. Final Fantasy X is not one that I have beaten, and it is one eventually I'd like to go through. But I've never set aside a copy for myself. So I kind of got excited when I saw this one here because I remembered that I did have a box and a manual for this thing. So, you know, to get that out, to marry up the disc with the box and the manual, again, that's why we're here. I mean, it's a good feeling. Now this thing's complete. So I can put it on the shelf, right? Not yet, though. We're not in the green. I don't want to sell this thing if I don't have to, but we've got to get in the green. Alright, now things are looking up. A copy of Vampire Knight. You know, this is an interesting game. It's a gun con game. You don't have to have the gun to play it. You can play it without it, but it's a gun con game. It's a cool game. This is something that might actually be worth something here. And you know, I remember not long ago I had a complete copy of this game that went for about 20 bucks, maybe 25, somewhere in there, even without the gun. Now, this is a disc-only copy. I don't have a box manual for this thing. But this is definitely worth more than some of the other games we've looked at so far. And it's a pretty cool game. I mean, it looks good, it plays good. This is something I could see playing all the way through just for the heck of it, just to see where it goes. I've never done it before. But this is also a game that I'm going to be able to get some of my money back on. Since it's a disc-only copy, that's exactly what I intend to do. So I'm buffing some more of these games that need it, and it's not going well. I'm testing these things and we're getting freezing at load screens. They're just not working, and this is the part of the job that I hate. when you can't save these things, when you can't fix the damage. Just like I'm the doctor and they're the patient. I mean, it drives me nuts. You just want to fix all these things, and sometimes you just can't. And as luck would have it, it's not the Guitar Hero and Sports Cheese discs out of the lot that are messing up. It's the heavy hitters. It's ones that are really gonna hurt the bottom line. We got a Star Wars Battlefront 2 here that's not cooperating. We got a Ratchet and Clank game that won't load. I mean, this is not what you want to see happen. Again, it's really gonna hurt the bottom line. That's not the end of the line for these games. What I'll usually do with games that do still have data on them but just have skipping and freezing issues, I'll lot them together and I'll sell them in bulk to somebody that has a more industrial grade buffer that might could do a better resurfacing job. Gives these games one last chance at survival out there in the wild, and it gives me a little bit of my money back too. Or I'll get with GameStop if there's any of these that they will buy back defective, and expect them to do the same thing, sending it back to their refurbishing department using a better buffer than I have. Maybe they can get some action out of these things. Come to find out, the Ratchet and Clank game is still tradable. Looks like I can still get a little bit of my money back out of that. Put it in some store credit towards something else they have there. They always get more of my money one way or the other, so credit's not bad to have. A little bit further into the green there, but again, it just sucks to see some of these not working after I've put the time and effort into it. Now I'm pulling up a copy of Red Faction, Join the Revolution. And I don't know much about the Red Faction games other than there were a handful of them I think on PS3, all of them ended up in the bargain bin. Just wasn't a series that I ever looked at. I mean, it's kind of dated by today's standards, but looking at this thing, it's not awful, and the controls aren't awful. They're also not great, but at the same time, I could see playing through this just to see what it looks like, or just to see how it pans out. The real question is, what is this thing worth? And I'm guessing not much. This is a disc-only copy again. I don't have a box and a manual for this thing. The real question here is, how much further into the green is this game going to get us? Now we got some action coming. God of War, the first one. And I gotta tell you, I've never felt an urgency to get all the God of Wars and put them on a shelf and play through them all and just have them. I just haven't, because they're common. I've had so many God of War games come through over the time I've been in this business, and I've been recommended God of War games by literally every gamer I think I've ever known. I know it's great. I just never sat down and spent time with the series, other than just testing out copies and whatnot. I've always thought it was really cool. Then we get God of War on the PS4, and I gotta tell you, that is so my kind of game. The format that game is. It was mind-blowing. One of the greatest games I've ever played. Thoroughly enjoyed it. That finally lit the fire under my butt to get out there and get some God of War games, but the value shot up. All the God of War games were suddenly collectible as unicorn poop, and it blew my mind because they were still just as common as they had ever been, but the prices shot up. Even retail prices at, like, say, GameStop. I mean, you were seeing that. And that was just so strange because the GameStops were overloaded with these things. I mean, there were God of War collections that were pack-ins with, PS3 Slim bundles, and people would just trade them in instantly after they would buy the systems. There were God of War discs everywhere, and all of a sudden they were just nowhere when I finally want to sit down and play some of them. So here is this disc-only God of War. I've been wanting to just play this game all the way through and just really hammer it out. No, it's not a complete copy, but why don't I just hold on to this and get a little play on this until I find a better copy of it, and maybe we can let this one go. Either that or I'll just price it really high so maybe nobody will buy it and I'll have time to finish it. Now we got a copy of Jak 3 here. Still on the whole Jak and Daxter thing here. Again, I just didn't spend time with the series. I don't know if this is good or not. At least not in my opinion. I don't know if it will be. I mean, I just don't know what to expect here. Again, games like this back in the day suffered from horrible camera angles, and there were so many of these dadgum games, and it just seemed like all you did was run around and pick things up. Spyro is like that. Croc Legend of the Gobos. Jersey Devil. I mean, there were 1,000,001 of these dadgum things, so they just didn't really appeal to me. Maybe this is good. I don't know. There's a lot of interesting mechanics in the jumps and the controls and whatnot. So a little bit to learn there, a little bit of a curve, a little bit of platforming going on. You know, it's hard to say. Again, I want to experience all these, if nothing else, just to be able to say that I've done it. I mean, again, this series has a humongous fan base. I don't know that I'm going to join that fan base, but it's something I'd like to know a little bit more about. Either way, is this worth more or less than the other one that we've got? I don't know. We'll find out, right? So we reached the old end of file marker on this case, and I gotta tell you, it just didn't work out the way I envisioned. Wasn't as great as I had hoped. There were some issues we just didn't plan on. I mean, there were 5 defective discs in this lot. 5! And they were some heavy-hitting titles, too. I mean, there's always 1 or 2, but 5? Yeah, that hurts. And you know, this copy of Rogue Galaxy that was in there, this was just a demo disc. You can't plan for some of this stuff. There's always going to be issues, but I think the biggest issue here is the low overall value in PS2 games right now. The PS2 is in its crap phase, its crap stage. All systems go through it, and that's where PS2 is right now. Unless we're talking about real rare RPGs or something, they're just not worth anything right now, even though they're still cool games to go back and look at, which we did. But yeah, that's the real problem here, and I think it may be a better strategy based on how low the values were on some of these to lot these games together. Sell them as a group, maybe maximize the profit by minimizing the shipping expenses. Something to think about. And of course, there will be an update in a future episode letting you know exactly how well we did with this whole setup once it's done. But in the meantime, we had some fun. We got to look back at some old games, look at some game footage, and it's always fun hopping on an old console that you haven't really played on in a long time. I'm kind of on a PS2 kick now. It's been a minute, and it's great to be back on it. It invigorates the senses and just makes you want to do more with it. Just for old time's sake. Just something to think about. But you know what? I had a lot of fun on this whole experience, just checking some of these things out, and I hope that you had as much fun as I did checking out this episode. We're walking away a little bit in the green any way you slice it with a free copy of Final Fantasy X. Is it the biggest score ever? Obviously not, you know, but I gotta share the small victories with you as well as the big ones. They can't all be big. I mean, if they were, you'd call BS and you'd be right to do so. You know, it's about the experience, it's about the ride, and either way, we're walking away with a free game and I'm sure a little bit of money back in the bankroll for next time. So good things coming our way, good times to be had. Hope you enjoyed this episode again as much as I enjoyed making it.